she appeared at the door, after nearly 2 decades of silence, elegantly dressed, holding a small box in her hands. No one expected her. No one had invited her. And yet, there she was, Juanita Vanoy, Michael Jordan's ex-wife. All eyes turned toward her. The background music faded within seconds. The entire mansion, once filled with laughter and toasts to the past, fell into one of those silences no one rehearses, but everyone feels. It was Dolores Jordan's 84th birthday, the matriarch of the family. Michael had planned a private, elegant celebration with help from his current wife, Yvette Prieto. Live jazz, dinner at sunset, and a memory wall. But he wasn't ready for this. Inside, everything seemed to be going as planned. White flowers filled the corners of the hall. A long table was set in the garden, decorated with golden accents and vintage cutlery, Dolores's favorites. In the main room, a mural displayed photos from her youth with Michael, from humble days in Wilmington to his first NBA victories. Michael Jordan, as always, oversaw every detail. He wanted his mother to know she was, still, the foundation of that family. "Are the place cards all set?" he asked, adjusting them on the table. Yvette nodded with a gentle smile. She's going to love this. You thought of everything." But even he couldn't have predicted what was about to happen. 2 days earlier, Michael had received an email. Brief, almost cold. From Juanita Vanoy. Subject, Dolores. "I heard about your mother's party. I'd like to deliver something in person. I know it might seem strange, but this isn't about us. It's about her. I don't want to cause any discomfort. Just let me know if I can." Michael stared at the message for long minutes. He didn't reply. And yet, she came. When Dolores saw Juanita crossing the garden with slow steps, her eyes filled with tears, she didn't hesitate. She rose from her chair with the strength that 84 years hadn't taken from her, and embraced Juanita like a daughter who had left without saying goodbye. "You came." Juanita smiled, eyes brimming. "I had to." Michael watched from a distance, silent, still. That night, everything seemed upside down. His current wife, Yvette, remained graceful and composed. But something in her gaze made it clear this reunion did not go unnoticed. Dinner began with speeches. The children toasted their grandmother. Yvette read a poem written by Jasmine. Marcus had prepared a short video montage. Jeffrey spoke about the family's legacy. Then Dolores, with the calm of someone who has weathered many storms, asked to speak. "Today, I don't just celebrate my age, I celebrate my story. And no one has been a deeper part of it than the woman sitting here beside me." Everyone turned. "Juanita!" The room took a collective breath. Dolores held her former daughter-in-law's hand. "You were more than my son's wife. You were part of me. And you still are." Michael lowered his gaze. After dinner, Juanita slowly stepped forward. She still held the box she had brought. "Dolores, I've kept this for many years. I wasn't sure if it was my place to give it to you, but now I understand it was never about place. It was about the right time." She opened the box. Inside was a collection of letters, photos, and mini-tapes, recordings of the children's early years, notes exchanged between her and Dolores, and even an old handwritten journal where Dolores had recorded Jasmine's first words, Marcus's drawings, and the day Jeffrey learned to ride a bike. Dolores brought her hand to her mouth. "You kept all this?" Juanita nodded. "'Cause even when things ended between me and Michael, you never stopped being my family." Michael, on the other side of the room, heard every word. But what he didn't yet know was that the box held more than memories. Inside was something that would completely shift the dynamic of that evening, and the entire family. Something even Juanita didn't know was there. The room was still silent. Everyone watched as Dolores held the small box in her hands, as if cradling something sacred. She gently removed the notes and old photos. Each paper, each image, was a dive into the past, bringing back memories that had slept for years, but never disappeared. Michael remained standing, leaning against the fireplace. His eyes followed his mother's hands, but his mind wandered elsewhere. It was impossible not to remember the turbulent years, the lawyers, the headlines, the hushed conversations behind the children's bedroom door. And there she was again, Juanita, sitting at the family table, as if time had turned itself around. Dolores reached for a smaller envelope, sealed, tucked at the bottom of the box. Unlike the other items, this one looked new. The paper hadn't yellowed. It had the scent of something recent. She frowned. "Juanita, do you remember this?" Michael's ex-wife looked confused. "No, I've never seen that envelope." Dolores turned the envelope in her hands. On the front, in bold handwriting, it read, "For my mother, Dolores." A delayed gift. Michael lifted his chin. "Wait, is that from Jasmine?" Dolores didn't answer right away. She opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, and folded between the pages, a notarized document. She began reading silently, her eyes welling up with every line. "It's from Jasmine, yes?" she murmured. Michael stepped closer, visibly intrigued. "What did she write?" Dolores glanced once more over the words before replying. She wrote about forgiveness, about love, said she wanted to leave a piece of herself for her grandmother, and that she was working on a project, an initiative for Black women raising their children alone. "Inspired by you, Juanita." Juanita covered her mouth with her hand. I didn't know," Dolores went on. "And this document here," she raised the paper. "It's the deed to a piece of land. Jasmine bought a property in Wilmington, the place where I raised Michael. She wrote that this would be the headquarters for the project." Michael sat down, stunned. "She told me about it, but I didn't know it had come this far." Dolores took a deep breath. She said she wanted the place to be called Dolores House, a place of shelter, a symbol of continuity. Everyone fell silent. Juanita's gift, which at first seemed to be just a kind and sentimental gesture, held within it the seed of something far greater, something Jasmine had hidden, perhaps waiting for the right moment. Juanita discreetly wiped her eyes. "She didn't tell me any of this. Maybe she thought I wouldn't understand, or that I didn't want to be a part of anything anymore." Dolores held her hand firmly. "You were always part of it, even when you thought you weren't." Hours later, as night settled in, Michael stood in the garden looking at the photo mural. Each picture seemed to tell not just the story of his career as a star, but of his journey as a man. There were genuine smiles, and others that now, from the outside, seemed forced. Juanita approached quietly. "It wasn't my intention to surprise you like this, Michael." He kept his eyes on a photo of the three of them with baby Jasmine in his arms. "But you did," she gave a sad smile. I just felt that your mother deserved something more, something that wasn't about pain." Michael finally turned to face her. "You know how much this family has been through, Juanita. You know the price it came with." She nodded. "And yet, here we are." He crossed his arms. "Why now?" Juanita took a deep breath. "Because for the first time in a long time, I also wanted to come back. Not to what we used to be, but to what we never stopped being. A family, even if in pieces." Inside, Yvette watched the two from the window. She knew it wasn't jealousy she felt. It was unrest. Because there was something between Michael and Juanita that time hadn't erased. It wasn't romance. It was a bond forged through years of pain, children, and interrupted new beginnings. Dolores sat beside Yvette. "Don't be alarmed," Yvette smiled softly. "I'm not, just trying to understand where I fit in all this." Dolores held her hand. "Your place is exactly where you are. But sometimes, for something to grow, we have to let the soil breathe. And that, my dear, is what's happening today." Yvette lowered her gaze, understanding the weight of those words. That night was only beginning. But something had already changed. Juanita's gift had triggered more than memories. It had brought to the surface the family's scar, and with it, an unexpected chance for healing. And Michael, for the first time, didn't know if he was ready for what would come next. The night moved slowly. The clear sky allowed the stars to peek shyly through the branches of the garden trees. The sound of jazz had quieted, and now only the muffled laughter of scattered guests could be heard. The party had taken on a new rhythm, not less joyful, but more introspective. Dolores walked among the gathered chairs, dragging her fingers along the white linen tablecloth. She seemed at peace, and there was something in her face, a gentle glow not seen in years. "You seem calm," Michael said as he approached. She gave a faint smile. "I am, even after everything that happened today. Especially because of it." Dolores looked up at the sky. "What your daughter did, and what Juanita brought, it was more than symbolic. It felt like someone finally closed the wound, not in a rush, but gently, like hand-stitched thread." Michael took a deep breath. "I still don't know how I feel." Dolores nodded. "You don't have to know just yet. Sometimes the heart takes longer than the mind." Meanwhile, Yvette was tidying up some dishes in the kitchen. She had chosen to step away for a few minutes. Juanita's presence had stirred something inside her that she couldn't quite name, and deep down, she feared admitting it. It was a kind of quiet sadness, not out of insecurity, but from realizing there were stories in Michael's life she would never be a part of, fragments of a life built before she arrived. She was washing dishes when she felt someone behind her. It was Juanita. "Can I help?" Yvette hesitated for a second, then offered a polite smile. "Sure." The two began drying dishes and folding napkins in silence. For a while, the sound of running water was their only conversation, until Juanita spoke. "I know today was strange. For you, for me too." Yvette glanced sideways. "You were respectful, and you brought something important for the family. But I also brought confusion." Yvette dried her hands with a dish towel. "You brought memories, and that always stirs things up a bit." Juanita took a deep breath. "I don't want to interfere. I know you're the one by his side now, and it's clear how well you care for Dolores, for Michael, for the home." Yvette allowed herself a sincere smile. "Thank you, but you don't need to convince me of anything, Juanita. You're not a threat. You're just part of the story." "An old part," Juanita said. Yvette nodded. "But one that, whether we like it or not, helped build this present." They looked at each other for a moment. Not with rivalry, but with a silent respect between two women who, in different ways, had loved the same man and belonged to the same story. Later that evening, with the garden almost empty, Michael found a note on his mother's bed. It was from Jasmine. "Dad, I left this gift with Grandma because I knew she'd know what to do. I didn't tell you before because I'm still learning what it means to reconnect with old things without erasing the painful parts. But I want you to know that, to me, love isn't about keeping distance. It's about building bridges, even when we don't know if we'll cross them." Michael sat at the edge of the bed. His daughter's words landed somewhere between guilt and hope. He had been a present father in many moments, but absent in others that truly mattered. The separation from Juanita had left cracks, especially in the children. And now, Jasmine came forward with this mature view, full of forgiveness and purpose. He picked up his phone and sent her a short message. "You're teaching me how to love again. Thank you." Out on the porch, Dolores, Juanita, and Yvette shared a cup of warm tea. The three laughed over old stories, about one game Michael lost because of a fever, and the Christmas dinner when Marcus set the kitchen on fire trying to warm up dessert. It was as if time had suspended its rules for a few hours. "I keep thinking," Dolores said, "how things would have been if we had talked sooner. If all these years hadn't been spent in silence." Juanita replied, "Maybe we needed the silence to appreciate the sound that comes after." Yvette added, "And maybe now is the time for the right sound." The three clinked their cups together. There was no competition there, only understanding. The next morning, before leaving, Juanita went to Dolores's room with one last box. This one's just for you." Dolores opened it. Inside was a bundle of old letters, from her to Juanita, written during the years of Juanita's marriage to Michael. Words of encouragement, mother-in-law advice, sentences that mixed faith with firmness. I kept everything, because even when we weren't a family on paper anymore, in my heart, we still were. Dolores held the letters to her chest. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even from afar." And then, for the first time in many years, Juanita Vanoy left the Jordan family home without feeling like just a guest. She walked away with a light step, and with a certainty the past didn't have to be forgotten. It just needed to be honored with truth. 3 weeks had passed since Dolores's birthday. Time, though brief, had been enough to move pieces that had stood still for years. Michael woke up early that morning. He wore a plain shirt, jeans, and a pair of sneakers that few ever saw him wear in public. He was in Wilmington, his hometown. The air smelled different, of damp earth and hidden memories. Next to him, Jasmine looked out over the freshly cleared land where the headquarters of a new project, one she named Dolores's house, would soon be built. "It looks smaller than I remembered," she said, smiling. Michael smiled too. "Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we just got too big." The lot was only a few blocks from where Dolores had raised her children. With firm hands and an untiring heart. A simple neighborhood, but full of life. Jasmine pulled a small notebook from her pocket. "Everything is here. What we'll offer. How we'll support single mothers, the classes, the partnerships." Michael took the notebook and flipped through a few pages. "You did all this by yourself?" "With help from Mom and Grandma." He nodded in silence. There was something powerful about seeing 3 generations of women shaping a future for others. "And you? Are you going to be involved?" Jasmine asked. Michael looked toward the horizon. "I want to fund it. I want to use our family's name with purpose. But I also want to listen more than I speak this time." Jasmine smiled, pleased with the answer. In Charlotte, Dolores sat on the porch, reading one of the letters Juanita had left for her. Yvette brought her tea as she folded the bed linens they'd use for the weekend. The house was full again. "It's funny," Dolores commented, "how some words only make sense after many years." "Any word in particular?" Dolores pointed to the page. "Here," she wrote, "I didn't know how to be a daughter-in-law, but I always knew how to admire you as a mother." I read this years ago when she sent it, but I'm only now truly understanding it. Yvette, always discreet, simply smiled. She had learned to love that family with patience. And now she could clearly see that she too was part of the patchwork quilt being stitched together there. Full of old fabrics, but with new seams. Juanita, meanwhile, had returned to Chicago, but something in her had changed. The walls of her once silent home now displayed new photos. A recent picture of Jasmine smiling with her grandmother, a framed letter from her daughter hanging in the hallway, and, on the table, an invitation. It was the official launch of Dolores's house, scheduled for 2 months from now. Juanita thought long and hard before picking up her phone and typing the message. "Jasmine, may I attend the launch? I know this project is yours, but it would be an honor to see up close what you've created." The response didn't take long. "Mom, this house exists because of you too. You're part of it. We'll all be there." Juanita held the phone to her chest. It felt like, for the first time in years, she was rebuilding something she didn't know could still be hers. Preparations for the event were underway. Michael hired a team to organize a simple ceremony, but one with deep symbolism. Jasmine took care of the social planning and community engagement. She wanted ordinary women to feel like they belonged in that space. No grand speeches, no red carpet, just warmth. In a meeting with the team, Jasmine said, "This place isn't about charity. It's about belonging. My grandmother belonged to this neighborhood. My mother belongs to a legacy of struggle. And all these women deserve to know they belong to something greater than their fears. Her words moved everyone in the room. There was conviction there, and there was truth. Just a few days before the launch, Dolores received a call. "Mom, could you write something to be read at the inauguration?" She smiled on the other end of the line. "I can, but I don't want to write as the matriarch. I want to write as a woman, as someone who was also afraid, who also cried in secret, who also carried grocery bags alone with 3 kids tugging at her skirt." Jasmine laughed. "That's exactly what we want." On the eve of the event, the house was full once again. Dolores, Yvette, Michael, Jasmine, Marcus, and Jeffrey, all gathered under the same roof. Juanita arrived in the late afternoon. She held a gift wrapped in dark blue fabric. Michael opened the door. She smiled. "May I come in?" He took a deep breath, then gave a subtle nod and stepped aside. "Of course." Juanita stepped inside, and there, beneath the same roof that had once held only silence and distance, now pulsed a new kind of anticipation, one that felt like this event, more than launching a project, would mark the beginning of a new chapter. On the morning of the inauguration, the sun rose shyly, but with purpose. Wilmington felt different that day. A soft breeze stirred the trees and gently waved the flags bearing the name of the project. Dolores's house. The freshly painted building, with its wide windows and welcoming garden, looked more like an extension of a home than an institution. The wooden sign at the entrance was simple but dignified. The phrase beneath the name moved everyone who read it. "Every woman has the right to begin again, and no one begins again alone." The first guests began arriving around 9 a.m. Women of all ages, some with children in tow, others carrying in their eyes the weight of stories no one knew, but stories that would finally be heard here. Michael arrived holding Dolores's hand. The matriarch wore a light blue dress, her hair elegantly styled, her eyes glowing as if she were witnessing a dream take shape after a lifetime of waiting. "Ready?" he asked. She smiled gently. "I was born ready. I just didn't know it until now." Juanita was already at the venue. She was helping arrange the final details in the area where the speeches would be held. She stayed away from the spotlight, but her presence was felt. Some women recognized her, not as the ex-wife of the famous athlete, but as Jasmine's mother, as someone who carried a piece of the strength now being poured into this place, in both concrete and soul. Yvette, quiet as always, sat in one of the front row chairs. She had learned to observe the unfolding of it all with calmness. She wasn't trying to compete. She simply embraced, and there was something deeply noble about that. Jasmine took the small stage set up in the courtyard. She held the microphone with steady hands, took a deep breath before speaking. "When I imagined this house, I didn't picture a building. I thought of my grandmother, her embrace, the scent of food made with patience, the kind of silence that listens instead of judging. I thought of all the times I saw my mother hide her pain just to protect me. And I thought of all the women who, like them, keep moving forward even when everything tells them to give up." She looked at Dolores and Juanita. "This house has a name, but it also has faces. It has stories. It has roots." The audience applauded. Some women wept quietly. Dolores was invited to the stage. She walked slowly but with steady steps. She pulled a folded sheet from her pocket and began to read. "When my daughter was born, I had no idea that one day my name would stand over a project like this. All I knew was that I had to protect my children, even with so little. I never imagined that, decades later, someone would look back and see worth in my ordinary days. But Jasmine did. And she turned into a gift what, for me, was simply survival." She paused. "This house is not about me. It's about every woman who's ever felt invisible, about every mother who was told she was alone. Here, they'll hear something else, that they are seen, they are heard, they are loved." The applause erupted powerfully. Some women stood spontaneously. Others clapped with tears in their eyes. Later that day, Michael approached Juanita while she handed out welcome kits to the first women enrolling in the house's programs. "Thank you for coming," she smiled, not stopping her work. "I never really left." He paused, thoughtful. "I guess it took me a while to realize that." She handed a kit to a young mother holding a baby, then looked back at Michael. "Everything happens in its time. We just need to recognize when the right time comes." Michael nodded. "And it has." Inside the house, there was a photo display. 3 images marked the timeline of the project: Dolores, still young, holding a baby Michael in her arms; Juanita, smiling with her 3 children during a picnic afternoon; Jasmine, standing before an empty lot, arms crossed, gaze filled with determination. Those images spoke louder than 1,000 speeches. They were testimonies of a story passed through generations. A story with flaws, pain, pauses, but still alive. When the event ended, Yvette found Juanita near the parking lot. "Are you staying a few more days?" "I thought about heading back tomorrow." "If you want to have dinner with us tonight, Dolores would love that." Juanita hesitated. "Are you sure?" Yvette nodded sincerely. "Yes, today we all belong in the same place." Juanita smiled. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a leftover piece on the board. She was, finally, part of the game again. Only this time, with no competition. Just space for everyone. A few weeks after the inauguration, Dolores's house had become much more than just a building. It had turned into a meeting point, a quiet refuge for women who once walked the streets with hunched shoulders, downcast eyes, and hope buried beneath bills, shouting, and sleepless nights. Inside, they found someone to listen, and when they didn't feel like speaking, they could just sit. Sometimes silence heals, too. Dolores made a point of visiting the place every Friday, always with an elegant scarf tied around her neck, as if she knew her presence there wasn't just symbolic. It was lived experience, a testimony. One of those mornings, she found a young woman named Reina sitting alone in the courtyard, watching the swing that Jasmine had installed. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Dolores said as she approached. Reina looked up without saying a word. She seemed wary, like someone who had been wounded too many times by sweet words that were never followed through. "That swing over there," Dolores continued, "was my granddaughter's idea. She said sometimes a woman needs to feel like a child again, even for just a few minutes to remember she's still alive." Reina finally cracked a small smile. "I never learned how to play." Dolores sat beside her. "There's still time." Meanwhile, Juanita often returned to North Carolina. Jasmine had invited her to lead a therapeutic writing workshop with other women. At first, she declined. She didn't think she was good with words. But then she realized that her old letters to Dolores, to Michael, even to herself, were seeds that had taken root. At the first workshop, she handed each woman a blank sheet of paper and said, "Write to the person you never had the courage to speak to." Pens pressed hard against the paper. Some tears dropped onto the pages. And when the session ended, one woman hugged her tightly and said, "Thank you for not giving up on your story. It gave me the courage to start mine." Michael, for his part, had become a constant, though discreet, presence. One weekend, he brought Jeffrey and Marcus to help renovate the community room. "We don't know how to paint," Marcus said. "Doesn't matter. We'll learn," Michael replied. As the 3 of them brushed white paint across the walls, they laughed at old jokes, talked about basketball, and, for the first time in a long while, felt like they were part of something rooted not in fame, but in purpose. Jeffrey, the more reserved one, paused for a moment and looked at his father. "You know, I used to think you'd never be reachable again. Not just as a father, but as a man." Michael set the brush down. "I used to think it was too late." "But it's not." "Why not?" Michael smiled. Because now I realize my greatest victory wasn't on the court. It was understanding that I can still be part of something that builds, even after getting it wrong." On Jasmine's birthday, The whole family came together again, this time at the house. It was a simple celebration. Balloons, homemade food, and a mural where each woman wrote a word that described what she felt in that place. Some wrote strength. Others, new beginning. Juanita wrote forgiveness. Yvette wrote presence. Dolores, with her firm handwriting, wrote legacy. When it was Michael's turn, he held the chalk for a few seconds, then wrote just broken silence, and everyone understood. During the party, Jasmine read a piece she had written for that day. It spoke of memory, reconciliation, and the choice not to let the past define the boundaries of the future. At one point, she looked at Dolores and said, "Grandma, I used to think your strength came from your firmness, but today I understand. Your strength came from your gentleness." Dolores wiped her eyes. Juanita held her hand. Yvette, across the room, was also crying. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. It felt as if all the pieces once lost had finally found their place. That night, after everyone had gone home, Dolores stayed seated in the house garden, watching the empty swing, the mural notes, and the distant sound of laughter from the neighborhood. Michael approached and sat beside her. "What are you thinking about?" She looked at him with tenderness. "I'm thinking that when you plant real love, even the hardest soil can bloom." He nodded. "You're the soil of our family." She squeezed his hand. "And now you've become the gardener." They both smiled. Time was finally harvesting what previous generations had quietly sown. It was a cloudy Monday when an unfamiliar woman walked through the gates of Dolores's house. Her name was Amelia, 38 years old, and her face bore the marks of someone who had tried to smile for far too long without success. She held a small suitcase and the hand of her 7-year-old daughter. She didn't say much at the entrance. She just clutched a crumpled piece of paper with the name of the house and a handwritten phone number. One of the coordinators, a young woman named Elise, herself a graduate of the program, approached with gentle words. "You made it, and that's already a miracle." Amelia didn't cry, not then, but the trembling of her hands said everything. Elise walked her to the temporary dorm, showed her where the books were, the meal times, the group meetings, and before leaving, she added, "You don't have to say anything today, but when you're ready, we'll be here to listen." Meanwhile, Jasmine was organizing a new mentorship cycle with women from the community. This time, she wanted to include those who had survived extreme situations. It was time to show that survivors could also be mentors. During one of these meetings, Juanita shared her story aloud for the first time. "When I got divorced, I didn't just lose a marriage. I lost the version of myself I had shaped for decades. I had to re-educate myself. As a woman, as a mother, as a soul." The silence was complete. The women absorbed each word as if it were a key unlocking something forgotten within them. At the end, one woman approached and said, "You have no idea how many of us live in silence. What you said today saved my evening." Juanita hugged her like someone recognizing a long-lost sister. Dolores, on her end, had begun writing her memories. A small notebook, black cover, crooked handwriting, not to publish, not to win awards, but so her great-granddaughter, who didn't even exist yet, could one day know where it all began. She wrote about her fear of raising 5 children on her own, about the nights she cried herself to sleep and woke up smiling so they wouldn't notice, about how watching Michael become a giant didn't fill the emptiness she felt when he didn't come home. And she wrote a sentence that Jasmine would later find highlighted in the middle of the notebook. "I never wished for fame. I only wished that my pain hadn't been in vain." Yvette remained a silent pillar. In her own way, she offered administrative support to the house, helped behind the scenes, organized donations. One day, Jasmine pulled her aside and said, "You know you're a part of this, right?" Yvette smiled, unsure of how to respond. Some people think presence is just noise, but your way of loving is pure maturity. Thank you for that. Yvette wasn't easily moved, but that day she let a single tear fall. At the end of that month, Michael decided to visit the house unannounced. He brought 2 large boxes with him. "What's this?" Jasmine asked. "Memories." When she opened the boxes, she found old photos, medals, sneakers, shirts, and at the bottom, a handwritten letter. It was a letter from Michael to his mother. Jasmine read it aloud in front of the women at the house. "Mom, I spent a lifetime trying to be a hero to the world. But only now do I realize that my greatest privilege was being the son of the strongest woman who ever lived. Thank you for teaching me that loss is part of life. Thank you for never letting me give up. This house is yours. This story is yours. And everything that comes after will be too." From the corner of the room, Dolores wiped her eyes without shame. Juanita looked at her with tenderness. Yvette smiled. Jasmine clutched her chest. That moment was the consecration of all that had been healed, rebuilt, restored. And then something unexpected happened. Amelia's little daughter, the woman who had arrived weeks before, ran to Dolores in the middle of the gathering and handed her a drawing. It was a house with a heart on the roof. Inside, 4 women holding hands. At the top, written in big letters, "Grandma's house." Dolores looked at the girl, moved. "Is that the name you gave to this place?" The child nodded. "Because it smells like Grandma here." Everyone laughed and cried at the same time, and in that simplicity, there was more healing than in any speech. Autumn arrived slowly that year. Golden leaves covered the surroundings of Dolores's house, as if nature itself knew that something sacred lived there. It wasn't just a building of bricks and windows. It was a house of new beginnings, of bonds restored, of stories that had been broken, but never ended. The Jordan family often gathered there. Unlike the old days, there was no need for a special occasion anymore. Just the desire to be together was enough. Michael, who used to live on airplanes, attending events and meetings, now spent more and more time in Wilmington. He learned to bake bread with Dolores, something he never imagined himself doing. He watched NBA games without caring who won, but teared up at commercials about mothers, children, and second chances. "You've changed, son," Dolores once said. "You gave me permission to," he replied. One afternoon, Jasmine proposed something bold. "Let's create a permanent memorial here." Michael frowned. "Oh, a memorial?" "Yes, not about death, about life. A room where every woman who's ever been here can leave her mark. An object, a letter, a portrait, something that says, 'I existed, I endured, I bloomed.'" Juanita loved the idea, and each story will inspire the next, like stepping stones. Yvette added, "And the room could be called The Women Who Made It Happen." Everyone agreed. Months later, the memorial was inaugurated. Dolores cut the ribbon with trembling hands, but a steady smile. In the center of the room sat a rocking chair with a plaque that read, "Here sat the woman who taught a generation how to stay." On the wall, among dozens of portraits and mementos, was a rare photo. Young Michael asleep in his mother's lap while she read the Bible softly. Jasmine added a caption, "Before he was the greatest, he was silently loved." The final story of that night was told by Amelia. Now, fully recovered, with her daughter studying at a local school and a new job as an administrative assistant at the house itself, she was invited to speak before the community. "I came here afraid, thinking no one would see me, thinking I was just another face. But this house, it saw my pain and didn't turn away." She paused. "The House of Dolores didn't just give me shelter, it gave me back my voice." She looked at Dolores, Juanita, Yvette, and Jasmine seated in the front row. "And now, with this voice, I say to all the women still trying, you are not alone." The applause was long. Not out of formality, but because everyone in that hall knew something profound had been restored. That night, after the celebration ended, the family stayed behind to stack the chairs, put away items, and turn off the lights. Michael suddenly stopped in front of the mural of words written by the women of the house. Among words like freedom, hope, and healing, there was one he hadn't seen before. It was short, just faith. And beside it, a small signature in pink ink. Dolores. He smiled, touched the word with his fingers, and felt something deep stir in his chest. Before they left, Dolores walked alone to the house's porch. It was cold, but she didn't care. She closed her eyes for a few seconds. She thought about the nights she cried alone in the bathroom, about the plates of rice and beans made from scraps, the letters never sent, the I love yous only whispered in her heart. She thought of how strong Juanita had been raising the children through it all, how wise Yvette was in choosing love over competition, how Jasmine turned pain into purpose. She thought of the grandson yet to come, the woman yet to arrive, the wound yet to be healed. And then she whispered, "Thank you, God, for never making me invisible, even when the world tried to erase me." In the months that followed, the house continued to grow. Other branches were already being planned. The House of Dolores stopped being just a name. It became a movement. And whenever someone asked, "How did this all begin?" the answer was simple. It started with a mother, a rocking chair, a son who finally listened, and a family who chose to remember. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that reconciliation is possible, that bonds can be rebuilt, and that love, when it's real, transcends time, mistakes, and even silence. Leave a comment below. What was the phrase that moved you the most in this story? Let's build a mural of healing words, just like they did at the House of Dolores. If you love stories that move, transform, and inspire, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Here, every video is a reminder. Family can be rewritten, and forgiveness is always a beginning.